contact information so I can have the publisher send it directly to you. There's only 2 that I'm prepared to give away, otherwise it might get to be a bit pricey for me. And they have 2 copies. I would probably give away the Pride edition, and those are kind of neat. Now, before we get too far into things, I want to kind of set things down. There is a reason why I'm dressed like this, is to distinguish between how you're used to seeing clergy and how other clergy. So I realized growing up in the Adventist church, this was the way clergy dress. So I wanted to set a distinction. I am clergy, but I'm not an Adventist. And I brought this, which is a stole typically in church like this. And this is a symbol of service. The clerical collar is a symbol of service. So I'm here to serve you, not the other way around. I'm not here to tell you what to think or how to think or what the right things are to do. This is an exploration. This is more kind of us thinking out loud. I wanted to start the service with lighting the chalice. During one of the darker times of World War II, the Unitarian Service Committee operated in Nazi-occupied Europe. They needed a logo to look official for the German authorities. They commissioned artists to do one, and it was a flaming chalice. And people who had the flaming chalice in the windows of their home or on their cars or on them were considered to be safe people who could approach if you need to get out of Nazi-occupied Europe to save your life. So this is a symbol of a number of things, one of which is safety. Another one, of course, is the presence of the Spirit. I didn't want to come here and leave you with the feeling all you got was a whole bunch of lectures on stuff that maybe was very, very dry and academic, which would be my normal. I did want you to have something that might feel good spiritually for you. So this is a shortened reading from the Celtic Rhythms of Life. And I have left out portions that I thought might not be as meaningful to us. Come, Creator Spirit, fresh as the morning dew, revive us and make us anew. Let us arise today in the Spirit's power. In the place of fear, God's strength to uphold me. In the place of emptiness, God's love to fill me. In the place of confusion, God's eye for my seeing. God's wisdom to save me from false agendas that harm my body and soul. The Lord said, I will guide you along the best pathway of your life. I will advise you and watch over you. Glory to God, Creator, Redeemer, Sustainer forever. Healer from heaven, renew our bodies. Healer from heaven, revive our hearts. Healer from heaven, restore our souls. God becomes one with us, that we may be one with God. Come like fire that warms our hearts. Come like wind and refresh our frames. Come like water and revive our souls. Come like the earth and nourish our being. On those whose day is drab, come, Holy Spirit. On those who harbor fear, come, Holy Spirit. On a parched land, come, Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit. Lord, may your church grow in holiness and in number, peace and blessing from the Spirit and from the three who are ever one. May our hearts beat this day with wings of wild goose, the untamable Spirit of God. I was asked to tell a bit about myself, which is something I try to avoid doing. There are things that maybe I don't really feel comfortable saying at times. So I was raised in the Adventist church, third generation on both sides of the family. Off and on went to public schools and to Adventist schools for elementary and junior high. And for high school, most of high school was in a public school. The last year was at an Adventist boarding academy. I feel pretty positive about elements of the church, but there were theological factors that I felt were behind some of the actions that people were taking. And there was quite a bit of bullying that was going on in some of the small churches in small towns in Alberta. And I got to thinking one night, what's the common element? I realized when I looked in the mirror, I saw the common element. And I made up my mind I had enough. One more time, and I would leave. And then one more time came. And I found greener pastures, I thought, in evangelical circles, and people who are from progressive church denominations be a little bit shocked when they hear this. I went to a Baptist church that was very close to Southern Baptist, and it felt like for the first time I actually had the freedom to think spiritual, that I felt I didn't have in a small Adventist church. So I went there for a few years in Baptist and Pentecostal circles, and ended up being asked to leave, having things to do with my theology regarding LGBT plus people, and then of course that you can't possibly affirm people unless you are gay, right? So they asked some questions there, and I felt it was none of their business, so we didn't go there. And I was asked to leave and never come back. You know, so that's the first time I was formally excommunicated, you might say. The second time I was excommunicated by a church I'd never been a part of, never attended, never gone to, was not a member of, and I got a double registered letter. So did a whole bunch of other people. I didn't know you could be excommunicated from a body you've never been a part of. So I've been excommunicated twice, 3 times as a hat trick. Is that correct? I got that right? So I'm kind of thinking that maybe 3 times is a charm. It's kind of a holy trinity of being excommunicated, but I'm not there, so I'm a little bit shy. I currently attend the United Church of Canada congregation, and at that congregation I help with the firm ministry, and occasionally I speak, and regularly I'm doing other things in the community. So a number of years ago, I was photographed at Pride in Edmonton. I have the picture in front of me. It says I was born gay, you were taught religion. And when I managed to go through and find the picture, it said it was viewed over 850,000 times on that one website alone. So when I happened to be with the premier a few years after that, in his car as we were going through the Pride Parade, he says to me, well, I guess now everybody will know that you're gay. And I said, I think that ship already sailed. And I am ordained as a Universalist Christian clergy, so that's not interfaith, that's Christian. The difference being that somehow we believe that God's infinite love is so deep that it can save and heal everyone. There is an African proverb that you may want to take a peek at. To me, it feels meaningful. We spend our lives thinking the wolves are somebody outside, and sometimes we find the ones that are the most dangerous are actually supposed to be the people who are helping us. And they aren't the people who are helping us. So as it says there, it's the shepherd that eats the lambs. And yet the shepherd's job is supposed to be to protect them. And I like this saying, religion's for people who are afraid of hell, and spirituality is for people who've been there. And if you've gone through a lot of religious trauma, and I certainly have, and I suspect many of you have as well, you probably feel like we've been there. So we may be feeling more spiritual than religious. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. And I think spirituality is kind of simple. All you need to do is love God, do good, and go home. That works for me. But there's an element of spirituality that's not here. And my atheist friends might not be very happy with me saying this, but spirituality is also contacts among different people, between yourself and the environment. So those things can be very spiritual too. So spirituality is not something that's strictly God-oriented. Oops, I'm going the wrong way again. Oh, sure, I think so. There we go. There are a number of different definitions of bullying. I'm not sure if you want me to get into all of them, but they will be up on the slides. It generally requires a bit of an imbalance of power, but maybe not in ways you would think of. There's physical and verbal and relational and cyberbullying, sexual bullying and prejudicial bullying. And there's general spiritual bullying. That's kind of where we use our belief systems to cause people to feel fear, shame, intimidation, violence, and the use of scriptures to embarrass, humiliate, degrade, all those kinds of things. And my rule in churches, when I was still going to the very conservative churches, if it ever gets violent, police are getting involved and we're done. That's too far. Now, bullying doesn't necessarily mean you're weak. I think this is an important point. Up here points out 93% of Alberta teachers who responded to a survey said they had been bullied at one time or another, either by students or parents. So the fact that you've been bullied does not mean that you're a terrible person. It just means you are a person. Probably no one has escaped completely. And part of the problem is we use the Bible to reject people and to draw lines. You're in or you're out. A number of years ago, after the murder of Matthew Shepard, one of the professors at Island School of Theology in Denver, Colorado, gave a memorial sermon for him. He told the story when you're out. You know the game when you're out, you can't come in. Does that ring a bell for anybody? I guess I'll just let you describe it. Students would stand in a circle, holding hands. And then the challenge was for you to somehow break into the circle. If you couldn't break into the circle, you stay out. If you can break into the circle, then you're one of the people who holds hands and the circle gets larger. And he said he was never good enough to be able to break in. And his friend, who was a girl, drops the hand of the guy beside her and winks at him. He comes racing through, and the guy that's beside her complains, if you do that, everybody will get in. She smiles, I know. That portion of the sermon is in a book on how to give good sermons. When we look at the Bible, we need to be seeing how it serves us, how it can make us better people, not how it can make other people better people. I encourage people to think about that. You've got some rights. You should be respected. You should feel safe. You have a right to say, this is how we're going to discuss things. Draw your line in the sand and hold it. You have a right to an abuse-free conversation, anger-free conversation, and the right not to be condemned to hell. You have the right to study, to understand, and not to win a debate. Religion shouldn't be about debating. I remember when I was in college, one of the teachers there made the comment that Adventists used to win all the debates back in the early days of the Advent movement. He said, I don't think we won very many friends. We have a right to know and a right not to know. And it is absolutely okay not to know. We have the right to make mistakes and believe things that sound like they're wonderful until somebody gives us a critique. We realize it may have been the dumbest thing we ever said or thought in our lives. We have the right to rethink our positions and to study more before reflecting and answering. One of the best examples I saw of that was by a man who was the Seventh-day Adventist minister in Southern California. He had three master's degrees, master's degree in the New Testament, or in the Old Testament, Master of Divinity degree. And somebody asked him a question after church. He said, you know, I haven't thought that one through. I don't know. And I thought that was one of the best things that he could role model. You don't have to know everything. Now, I have a Bachelor of Education degree. I'm a certificated teacher. I think the expectation on my part, and probably the parts of a lot of other teachers, is you know everything. If you don't, just kind of get up and say stuff and fill the time and try to make people think that you know. I think the kids see through that. But I suspect they respect us more for saying, I don't. We have the right for the Bible to not be used to weaponize us. We have the right to say we're not going to talk and to walk away. We have the right to end the conversation if it becomes abusive. So some of the things that I try and go by is no kitchen sink debates. And I'll bring that later. Only discuss one text at a time, agree till you agree, or agree to disagree and end the conversation. We're not going to be here all day. We're not going to let people throw Bible texts at us until we're overwhelmed. No yelling, no condemning anyone to hell. And if a person says, I'm not telling you you're going to hell, God is, the conversation is over as well. And I would bring that right up at the beginning. I'm not going to do that. And everyone taking part in the conversation should be somebody that you approve of and you're okay being there. You can refuse to discuss the issue with your pastor. And here's the reason why I'm saying that. I have not studied Hebrew and Greek, but many ministers have. It's not fair for me to enter into a conversation with a person who has a master's degree and has studied a lot of Greek, or has a PhD in theology and has Greek and Hebrew. I don't. And I had somebody a number of years ago that wanted me to open up my website for discussion with people who are homophobic. And I said, no. Homophobic people have lots of places to spew their hate. It isn't happening here on my time. It's not happening. So you can refuse to discuss this with your clergy because unless you have the same level of education, it's an unequal power dimension. And it can easily turn into something abusive, even if the minister is trying very hard not to. You have a right to say, it's okay if we discuss that, but I'd like my clergy who's affirming to be a part of the conversation. So you have two people with closer to the same level of education discussing. That's okay. And it should be a neutral place, not your home. A few years ago, after a couple of negative experiences, I kind of said, my home is not where ordained ministers are going. With only a couple of exceptions, that's the way it stayed. But if person, I want to have lunch with you in your home. We can have lunch in a restaurant. I will pay for the lunch. You're not coming to my home. It has to be a safe place. So what we're trying to do is to avoid this kind of thing. Because if you are discussing the Bible with a person who has memorized massive amounts of the Bible, I know a man who had memorized one time the entire New Testament, committed it all to memory. The sad thing was he didn't understand what it said, but it was all there. Try to argue with him, discuss something with him. You're probably going to come out into the mat. So we don't have to get into a win or lose type of situation. Oops, I'm going to go over again. One of my superiors when I was in college used to say over and over to me, it's a very poor pair of feet that lets your face take a beating. You don't have to engage, you don't have to take the beating. And I think that people have a very negative image of God in it struggling to be happy Christians or Muslims or Jewish people or Hindus or anybody else. Now, there are a number of ways we can respond, and I liked this one. There are two people I can think of who kind of use this. It's a youth day. One was an old Catholic bishop, and somebody asked him a question that was Protestant. And he said, "What's a Protestant issue? I'm Catholic." That was in the discussion. He didn't get involved in some of these divided Protestants for centuries. He stayed out of it. And there's a person on YouTube who I think goes by Deconstructing. He used to be a Christian. He's a gay man. Very interesting person. Somebody came on once and was asking questions about sin. He said, "Well, I'm an atheist. Sin is a you thing. It's not a me thing. And it's okay to take that approach. I'm not going to adopt your problem. That's not my job. So if it's your problem, it can stay your problem. I'm not taking it home with you." And this is not a bad approach too. You need somebody to talk to you about this issue. It's obviously important to you. I'm not the right person. That's kind of drawing that line. You can discuss it with somebody else. You're not going to be discussing this with me. I like some of the humorous ones. I asked a colleague of mine, "What do you do when somebody says you're going to hell?" Now, he's a Unitarian Universalist, and they're very, very highly educated, very intellectual people. His response was wonderful. He talked slowly, and if he just kind of came out real slowly. "Well, tell them, don't wait up for me." The Lake and Fire t-shirts in Alberta a number of years ago, a person running to be a member of the legislature was found to have made a post as a minister saying that gay people were going to be in the eternal lake of fire. So I have a t-shirt at home that was my payment for speaking at Camp Firefly one year, and it says, "I went to the lake of fire," and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. And a colleague of mine used to do the last one. I don't know why it was always said to me and nobody else, but I used to kind of like enjoy teasing him about where he had grown up, because it was this tiny little town in Alberta that nobody had ever heard of. So sometimes I'd ask him where it was. He would give me numbers, figures, longitude, latitude. I have no idea if he made them up or if they were legit. And there were times when I would needle him more, and I would hear him rummaging through his desk drawers. "All right, I'm looking for something blunt and heavy." And there were other times when he'd say, "A man like you should go a long way." I think he meant just away, just please. And I like this one. That's a really good topic for conversation over coffee, especially as an Adventist minister, right? Over coffee. What you're trying to do is to put off the conversation, possibly terminate it forever, because maybe there's never a good time for coffee. And then, of course, this is my barista. That's my bird when it got out of the cage once. And I think if you point out that's your barista, maybe the person will be less interested in having coffee with you. And I might have a few other inappropriate comments as we go on, because sometimes humor is one of the best ways that you deal with the problem. Proving you're right is not always the best way. We listen to understand, we listen to care, and this is really important. No one can take away your spirituality. The Old Testament gives us a sense that we are in God's hand. We're actually being engraved in the palm of God's hand, and no one can take us away from God. So I kind of like to avoid arguments. One way to do that is to keep it short, to try and use I statements instead of you statements. So if you use the word you, it can be an attack right away. So I remember being at Wassera University, and I was studying like a lounge lizard out in the lounge. Along comes a student who sits down beside me. A few minutes later, he's saying things that are getting spiritually abusive. So what I did was I assumed a power position. I stood, and I said, what was just said was abusive. I do not talk to people when they're abusive. I gathered my books and I left. Now, no time did I say you were abusive. I didn't get involved in an argument, but I suspect that's something that he may remember. Now, some of this is basic communication strategy. When people say whatever it is, I feel, and you add in the words that are appropriate. Now, I'm not a good person at coming up with emotions. As many years as a counselor in school, you'd think I would have some degree of sense of what emotions are, but I can pick out the face that might work for me. So this just gives you some of the faces that might work for your emotion. When people say, whatever, I feel, and whatever one of those emotions is that works for you, or something else. You're getting from facts into emotions, and people tend to be a little bit easier on us if we're talking emotions rather than facts. At least that's my opinion. I hope I'm correct. So I feel blank when this happens. That's expressing your opinions without blaming. And then you can take it another step. I feel whatever it is, the emotion, when that, for example, someone spiritually abuses me or tells me what to help, and I need people to, and you need to fill in that blank. That can help you. So it's how you feel, what went wrong, and what you need now. And there are a number of other strategies. The broken record strategy, where you repeat the thing over and over again. Some of you may know Elliot Cruz, and I believe this was on Twitter, if memory serves me right, so it wasn't confidential, but somebody wanted to discuss, I think, something related to this topic with him. He said, we are not having this conversation. And if you say that over and over again, people probably get the message. And that might be just what you were needing to that day. It's my firm conviction. And sometimes a minister will stop and back up a bit if they hear somebody say, it's my firm conviction. Because it may be getting into an area that's ethically dicey if a minister is trying to change someone's firm conviction. And there are nice ways of telling people basically quiet. Thank you for sharing. Please keep it to yourself. Is kind of a nice way of doing it. That's much better than I would ever think of that. And this is from recent on the news. You may be aware of Governor Tim Walz's approach. In Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and their personal choices that they make. Even if we wouldn't make the same choice for ourselves, there is the golden rule, mind your own damn business. And it's okay to take that approach. Who you sleep with is not my business. I remember saying this when I was in an evangelical church. I don't want to know what goes on in your phone. Do not bring your bedroom to church. Hang up the phone approach. This was one that one of my superiors used. I don't remember using this, but he said, you make sure you hang up the phone when you are talking, because no one would ever believe you'd hang up on yourself. Then when you phone the person back, they're thinking you think that they hung up on you. They're all apologetic and much nicer to deal with. He swore up and down that it worked. And another way to do this is do not argue, to give resources. I was giving this presentation once where the person had been a little bit disruptive, a teenager. I just walked over and handed him a card that had a resource on it. I said, you can use this if you need some resources. After that, he was good. There was a minister I know who used to, instead of taking resources from the denomination and teaching people the beliefs distinct as the denomination, he did it himself. So there'd be polarization between the minister and some of the people who were in the membership class. It got bad enough that the elders took it away from him and said, we'll do it. We went through a book, so the person was mad at what was being taught. It's the book, it's the denomination's position. It's not our personal position. This is what the denomination is teaching. It takes it back a step, so you're not defending yourself. Then there's internet resources, there's books, there's pamphlets, there's books here. Certainly kinship is a resource for people. I have one that's getting some data. Yes, last couple questions later. Good, or if you feel comfortable now, I think this is being live streamed. Your question will go online. Is that okay with you? So if you're okay with it being, if you're already hearing it online, online,
My question is just about the internet.
Okay,
There's so much stuff on
yeah.
you know, and there's no guarantee that what a person is reading on the internet is real.
So for people who are listening at home and people who didn't hear that, how do we check stuff? It's kind of basically like part of the question. If stuff on the internet can be written by anybody, I can go on the internet and claim that I have a PhD in theology or a PhD in psychology or something. I don't. So you do need to check things out a bit. I tend to trust large organizations better than small organizations. The Human Rights Campaign has a section on religion. It's quite good. There's some other groups I'm trying to think of offhand. There are a lot of resources, some links are broken, on a website, creativegay.com. And there are literally hundreds of links there. And on that resource, I tried to include only things that I felt were credible. But you can't always tell because some people don't have very good internet skills when they're creating websites, and websites like some child did it, but the content's really good. There's a resource, Steps to Recovery from Bible Abuse by Rembert Trulove. And when he was still alive, that website was getting in excess of 500,000 hits a year. Very, very good stuff. And he wrote a book with the same title, which I think you can still get through the Metropolitan Community Churches publication company. So those are good, and there's some others I'd be happy to try and think my way through here. So strategies for problems, you can certainly avoid the word use, take charge immediately, power language, body language, get out of the conversation. Because sometimes that's where it starts, it just goes on and it goes south, it just keeps going south. And the longer you talk, the worse it gets. And this is what we're going to work on a little bit tomorrow. Reclaim the Bible, it's your book. The lady who used to be the pastor of the Edmonton Metropolitan Community Church, which is a largely LGBT church, Reverend Beverly Baptiste, in every service I ever heard her give, she would say, she wrote Bible, this is your book, which was probably one of the best things she could say, because we've been led to believe that it's a book for straight people, not a book that LGBT plus people produce. It's ours too. Be your own theologian. That's okay. We do it anyway. I'm giving you permission to do it. And I think God gives you permission too. Right direction. Now, I want to credit someone who's no longer alive. I remember asking this question on kinship about Madeline Haldeman, who used to teach religion at La Sierra University. I had wanted to contact her, was kind of asking some questions to get a sense of where she was, but when I tried to find her, I found out she was dead. I wanted to know that I was using this approach that she had mentioned in one of her Sabbath school classes, where you only study or look at one text at a time. That's it. We're done after that text is over. You explain why you believe that it's okay to be transgender, or it's okay to be gender non-conforming in any way, or it's okay to be LGBT, any of those things, and the conversation's over. This is not a lecture. There's a person who's gotten into some debates. He's well known. He's published a number of LGBT plus affirming books. Some of those debates, he has been dragged through the mud. It looks terrible. I don't have his background. I'm not getting into those debates. Because I don't think winning the debate is going to change anybody's mind, and losing it certainly isn't going to help either. And for some of these things you might want to use, from John 3:16, for whosoever, one of the most popular LGBT Christian websites for a period of time was whosoever.org. You know, the name on the URL said it all. Anybody, basically. And I like this when there's neither Jew nor Greek, nor there's bond nor free. This is one that I'm hoping makes our non-binary and trans friends feel better. There's neither male nor female. We're all one in Christ. And the conversation's over. So I don't know, I'm just going to look at my watch here. I don't know how much stuff you want me to go into, but I'm going to at least see if I can go through some of the general stuff. We need to put in context the texts that we see that are clobber passages. So I started looking at how sex was discussed in the Bible in general, starting with the passages that appear to be condemning sex trade workers. And I think sex trade workers, along with LGBT plus people, are victims of how people have inappropriately interpreted the Bible. When we look at things like the word whoring, whore, whoredom, I think some of the other terms that are used in the King James, you start going through those, what is it about? All 18 passages for the word whoring are used in worship of other gods. They have nothing to do with the act of sex. Or 15 times in the King James, 12 passages referring to worship of other gods. One is used to refer to a sexual act. One. And as you go through the others, you're going to find similar stuff. Whoredom 46 times. Once it looks like it could be a reference to a sexual act. So many of these passages that we've been using that might have been behind some of the horrendous things that have happened in our country in the last 30 or 40 years are not about sex that we thought they were. And you may be familiar with Robert Picton from British Columbia. He told an undercover cop, if I recall the story correctly, that he hoped to make it an even 50 sex trade workers. And I'm left wondering if that's partly our responsibility as Christians. Maybe we haven't done a good enough job of explaining our way through passages of the Bible. You know, there's Genesis chapter 2, which is the story of creation. You are probably safest if you consider the Bible to be literary and not literal, unless you see a reason to see it as literal. There are principles in that story that I don't think are literal. And the two stories of creation, the one in Genesis chapter 1 and the one in Genesis chapter 2, are not the same. And this is about God creating this companion for Adam. And the Hebrew word is translated as helpmeet in the King James, is gender neutral in Hebrew. It could be a male or it could be a female. There's a conservative Bible commentator whose books are very, very old, Matthew Henry, and he says God felt sorry basically for Adam's solitude. And Eve was created not for procreation, because God could have created a world full of people to start with, and God could have replenished the world. Genesis chapter 19, there's a lot of debate about what this could be. It could be a story of violence. There's some thought that it could be the James Moffat translation, bring them out, we may bring them. Ezekiel doesn't mention homosexuality. And this is an important point, it's probably not in your handouts. Sodom was condemned before chapter 19 of Genesis. Remember the conversation between God and Abraham? If there are 10 righteous people, will you save Sodom? God says yes. There weren't 10 righteous. The city was going down no matter what happened in Sodom. There are the two passages in Leviticus. Shall not man with lie with a man as with a woman. It's an abomination. Now it's interesting because one of the passages right before it talks about not offering your children to sacrifice to another god. That's the context. Oops. Leviticus chapter 20, similar, with a similar context. Because the first two verses of Leviticus chapter 20 talk about worship of other gods. So babies were offered as sacrifices to other gods. You may remember when one of the patriarchs was asked to take his son out and offer him as a sacrifice. God stopped. And the book, Saying No to God, kind of makes an interesting point. There are times when God tells us to do things God doesn't want us to do. And then we can flip the script. What message do we as queer and allies of queer and trans people get from this passage? We are to stop offering queer trans children as sacrifices to God by bullying them. Queer youth are disproportionately represented among the homeless. Person who was the director of the Pride Center in Edmonton for a number of years said to people, if you are thinking of coming out, you better have a bag packed and ready by the door. When he came out, his father grabbed him and threw him physically out of it. You have to be prepared for that. That is offering our children as a sacrifice. There's a Catholic publication from the American College of Catholic Bishops that I dislike strongly, but I like the title, so I'll share the title. It's always our children. If that's all you take home for today, that's going to be wonderful. Always our children. And in that booklet, the Catholic bishops told parents who are not to abandon your children, you are not to send them away only because they are gay or lesbian. That's offering, in my opinion, children to another God. Now, the modern standard English version, which is this version I talked about earlier, which is an affirming version translated by a gay theologian, here's how he translates it. Because he says in the Hebrew, it's man and boy is the way it's translated. That's what it actually means. I don't know Hebrew, so I can't comment. So he translates it this way: you shall not give any of your children as sacrifice to Moloch, neither shall you profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. You shall not lie with a child as with a consenting adult. That is detestable. And he does the same type of translation in Leviticus 20. Something about the Pauline epistles. It is a specific epistle. It is not a general epistle. There is a big difference. So the general epistles for all churches, all time. The Pauline epistles are specific. There is specific churches for specific people. So when we read those, we're reading somebody else's mail, which is a point that a bishop of a small conference made to me. You're reading somebody else's mail. We have to be careful when we're doing it. We don't always have all the context. And it wasn't meant for us. So we have to be very, very careful. Romans chapter 1. We look at the order of what's happening there in Romans chapter 1. The impression that I get as I look at the order is people have rejected God. That's the first thing that happens. And then it appears that they go out and have sex with people of the same gender. But we need to get a better sense of what's going on there. What's happening, in my opinion, is people were going to the temples of other gods. They were worshiping those other gods by having sex with sex trade workers in those temples. That was very common. So when the Old Testament prophets rail against the children of Israel for whoring around with other gods, I don't think that was anything other than liberal. Don't you be going to the other temples, guys, and having sex with male or female prostitutes, because they are actually getting money from that act of sex to support the temple and their God. So he's saying here they exchange the truth of God into a lie and worship, serve the creature more than the creator. because they were worshiping other gods. Matthew Henry says that this is about outward acts of idol worship. Verses 26 and 27 are also acts of adultery, idol. And then verses 26 and 27, Matthew Henry says, perhaps the apostle especially refers to abominations that were committed in the worship of idol gods, which were the worst uncleanness prescribed for the honor of their gods. 1 Corinthians is an interesting one. Let me see if I can skip through some of this. There were 1,000 temple prostitutes for the temple, one of the temples in Corinth. And Vernon McGee says sex was their religion. Probably some truth to that. In fact, he said, I think the Corinthians could teach us a few things about sex. Again, he might be right. We do have to be careful with the passages in Corinthians, because in Corinthians and Timothy, we see a word we don't see very often. We really don't know what the word means. So some people have translated it effeminate, which remember Trulich was a theologian, says it's an insult to women to use the term effeminate. It's not what it meant. It means soft. So if your spirituality is not toughened up, this is probably not a good thing. You need a tone of spirituality to weather the hardships of life. And I will say this for LGBT plus people, we've had it. The soul of allies in Canada with the same stuff that we've gone through. Oops. So this particular word is only used twice in the Bible. We're not sure what it means. It's not used often in ancient literature, so they don't know what it means from ancient literature either. And Nylon was a guru in ancient Greek, said it was used in the Sylvan, I hope I'm saying this right, or class, in the context of extortion and murder. There are some theologians that say Paul made up this word. And in the 6th century, astrologer used the term to describe those who sexually assaulted. In the Modern Standard English Bible, translates the passage in a different way. Male temple prostitutes and child molesters. And of course, Timothy uses that same problematic word. And if I'm going to condemn somebody, I want to know I'm standing on very strong grounds. And if we don't know what the word means, I'm not using it. But we've gone through some stuff that's pretty heavy. So I'm going to take just a moment and ask you to kind of relax. If you need to move around your chair a bit, squirm, stretch your back, whatever you need to do for a moment or two. That. I'm going to ask you to engage in some purposeful breathing. So what we're going to do here is I'll explain what we're going to do first. We'll take a few deep breaths that won't look right away. In between those deep breaths, I'm going to ask you to go back to your regular pattern of breathing and just focus on how your body feels as you're breathing. So I tend to focus on my nose as I move the air going in and out. That's okay, that's what you do. So what I'll do is I'll probably give you about a count of 3 and 6. Deep breath in. Hold it for a moment. You'll breathe in through your nose. So let's start at 3. 1, 2, 3. Deep breath in. Hold for a moment if you can. Out through your mouth. Let's go back to a regular pattern of breathing for a moment or 2. Out of 3 to 6. Another deep breath in. Breathing into our nose. 1, 2, 3. Hold for a moment and Breathing out from your mouth. Just relax for a moment. There's a centering prayer I hope you'll join me with. I will say a sentence, and I will allow you a few seconds to say it back. We can probably do that together, the repeating part. And then we'll go on to the next sentence. God created me on purpose.
God created me on purpose.
I am no accident.
I am no accident.
God loved and accepted me before the world existed.
God loved and accepted me before the world existed.
God, affirm your love for me.
God, affirm your love.
Heal the aching parts of my mind, my body, and my soul.
Heal the aching parts of my body, my mind, and soul.
Amen. And you are welcome to hit me with questions, but I'm going to assure you, I do not do what some clergy do who are